All right, today we're going to talk about the K-shaped economy, how it's obliterating the lower class and destroying the middle class. So this actually came up from an interview I watched recently where I believe it was an economist who was talking about this idea of a K-shaped economy, meaning there are two prongs, right? One going upwards and one going down. Now, the upward K vertical is obviously the rich, the top 10, 5, 1%, however you want to split it. The people owning assets, the people that are in power, that have businesses, that are already established. Life has never been better for them, right? Because of inflation and because of AI and productivity gains all working in their benefit. But the opposite is also true for the lower prong of the K, right, which is lower and now more progressively middle class. The middle class is getting destroyed. Either a few of them are going up, but most are decreasing, right? Cost of living is up. Their wages are stagnant. Insurance, food, all these things. So the split, no one wants to talk about. It's not left versus right. Politically, there's always noise in the news, right? Talking about Gaza, talking about politics, talking about what all these people are doing. But really, that's all just a distraction to keep you from the real reality, which is actually it's up versus down. It's rich versus poor. It always has been, and that's what everyone feels at day to day when you go to buy things, when you get your paycheck. And so that's the reality of today's economy. So modern America has two economies, and for the upper class, things have never been better, right? Spending like crazy, enjoying everything, making tons of money, and then for really everyone else, and this gap continues to widen, there's the lower economy. And so the rich don't see the struggles of the middle and lower class because they don't ride the subway, they don't clock in at an office, they don't maybe even go to the grocery store. They have other people do that. And so they don't feel the effects of the working class people, and they don't care. All right. So a little more detail of what is the K-shaped economy. Really, it's the rich getting richer and the poor and middle class getting poorer. Okay. This is because of inflation, because of economic policies, and a million other factors that all go into this, but it's just that divergence that is really being felt much more since 2020. I don't know the exact figure, but I know a significant portion of our US dollars were printed in 2020, 2021, and 2022. Without getting into conspiracy theories of like distractions and why and was that all necessary, but over the last few years, everyone feels when they go to the grocery store, when they buy anything, when if you remember the price for your Chipotle order a few years ago and then look at it now, you see it's up 50% higher, give or take, right? And so a lot of things are contributing to this: inflation, asset bubbles, AI, housing crisis, right? And that's just partially currency debasement, right? Erosion in the trust of the U.S. dollar, and that those repercussions are felt throughout the world, right? Because the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency of the world. Everyone, most countries accept it and trade with it, and it's tied to basically all economic activity. Okay, so the politics that help the capital markets don't help the labor market. So really, if you look at everything Trump is doing recently. It's to help banks with talking about introducing 50-year mortgages, 15-year car loans, and screwing over the working class, right? And so that's the divergence, and that's what's going on. So the explosion of the top arm, okay? If you look at any charts depicting however you want to split it, the top 10, 5, 1%, right around COVID, you see that the rich have accumulated way more asset value, and the lower and middle class are barely scraping by, right? Either stagnant or down. Okay, so asset owners are winning big. Those who own a lot of stock, who own real estate, who own their own businesses, who own precious metals, anyone who owns any physical or intangible assets are doing great, because inflation and GDP growth and compounding and all of these things, and people who don't own any of those things, aka the bottom 80%, don't get any benefits from this at all, right? And so a really important factor or thing to think about here is that the stock market is not the economy. So although the stock market is near record highs, you don't feel like you're doing at a record high, right? In comparison to the stock market, you feel, your monthly bills, you look at your income versus expenses and you say, I'm getting screwed because everything is much more expensive. And so high income workers are pulling away. So those are people in, higher positions in tech and finance, high skilled workers, business owners, executives, politicians, anyone in positions of power are doing great. And those who have remote work benefits and don't have to worry about commuting and, eating out and putting gas in their car and maintenance and all these things, they can work behind a laptop just from home, doing better than everyone else who is a laborer, blue collar person who has to go into a physical job, right? And all of those things are adding up. And so the tax structure also is rigged towards the upper kind of echelon of people, with corporations being able to finesse the system, paying less taxes than W-2 employees. This is very well known with tax loopholes and all these things. And so you're taxed much higher when you actually work and trade hours for dollars than if you own a business and you can move money around and drop your overall taxable income. Okay, so the collapse of the bottom arm. This has really been felt since COVID, especially with inflation of everything at least 25% higher. Everything costs 25, 30, 40, 50% higher since 2020. And your wages are not up 50% since that time. They're stagnant, and they do not keep up with inflation. So that is a huge point of concern. And again, from this topic, the economist who I listened to talk about some of this said that basically the idea of you boil a frog by putting them in a pot and slowly raising the temperature and they don't notice, right? Well, we're already essentially at a boiling point where people notice, people see, hey, I can barely even make the minimum payment on my credit card. I can't afford insurance. I can't afford to eat out anymore. I have to financially calculate if I can afford a McDonald's Big Mac or some shit like that, right? So all of this is very worrying for anyone who lives in reality. And another interesting point is that six-figure kind of threshold of feeling like you financially made it when you make at least $100,000 US per year is no longer the case. There was a poll recently done where boomers, millennials, Gen Z, Gen X were all asked, how much money do you have to earn in order to feel financially secure or stable? And the average answer was actually around $200,000 to $250,000. So it's not six figures anymore. It's double that people feel like they can actually breathe and enjoy life. Whereas maybe before 2020, 100K was good. Now people are basically doubling that number. Okay. So real wages are down since really 1981. The average W-2 worker, especially a male worker, earns roughly 62K, and that number has not increased since 81. Okay, wages increased up until that point, early mid 1900s, and now inflation is outpacing wages, and wages are not really going up. For women, they are still going up slightly. I believe the average income for women is roughly 54K, so still below men. But most people are not earning as much as the inflated cost to live. Okay, so on top of this, we have the housing bubble, car prices, used new car prices being obscene, insurance seemingly going up every single year, whether it's health insurance, homeowners insurance, car insurance, all of these things. Medical costs being completely debilitating if you don't have medical insurance, and you get in a horrible car accident, for example, and then you need to have some life-saving surgery and go into $300,000 in debt, and now you're basically screwed, right? And then also childcare in there, very expensive as well. Some people work full-time just so that they can pay for the daycare for their child, and then they earn nothing extra on top of that because of how expensive childcare is. Okay, so with that, we have a huge debt bubble. If you've looked at the national debt for the United States, it's around $38 trillion, and it only goes up because of incompetency, of corruption, of however you want to split it or call it, but that only goes up, right? And then it's also at an all-time high credit card debt for consumers. It's at, I believe, $1.3 trillion for U.S. citizens with consumer credit card debt. That's an all-time high. And on top of that, credit card rates are also obscene, 20 to 25% APR or higher. So a lot of people have to stack on credit card debt, either because they're financially illiterate or likely just because the cost of living has outpaced wages, right? And so they stick things on their credit card, food, clothing, necessities, car maintenance, and then from there it's a vicious cycle that your credit card interest goes up and you make a minimum payment, which is not enough to bring down your total balance. So that number just grows over time, and so you get deeper and deeper and deeper into debt because you can't afford the basic necessities. Okay. Another huge shock factor recently after Biden was student loans restarting in the U.S. So for a few years there, people didn't have to pay their student loans, so they could put that money towards other things. And then now with Trump, over the last year or so, has made people start paying back their student loans. So whatever that number is, $100 to $300 per month, is now taken away from people that were putting that money into other things, consuming, investing, cost of living. And so this has caused a lot of defaults in car payments. I know 60-day delinquency rates for people who own have a loan on their car, and repossessions and things like that because they miss payments and can't make it, have spiked partially because of this, and then because of everything else we've talked about too. Inflation and all of that has caused people to fall behind, okay? And so people surviving off debt is not a winning recipe, right? You're not the U.S. government. You can't just print money out of thin air and kick the can further down the road. Eventually, with your credit cards maxed out, with financial crises personally, right? With your car breaks down, you get a health issue, something like that. Eventually, if you can't make it, you have to declare bankruptcy, right? And so that is where a lot of people are headed with in this economy. Okay, so GDP growth does not equal a good economy for the average person. So gross domestic product, even though it's going up, right? You don't necessarily feel that, right? So that's because of massive immigration, just unchecked immigration, people coming into the country over the last 4 years, has driven the cost of everything up because more people are here consuming. So there's less of that stuff to be passed around, right? And so although this is great for the people at the top because their assets inflate, not good for people at the bottom because it's direct competition, right? Same thing with productivity. Productivity has constantly been going up, but working wages are not. Maybe you're using AI to help do your job. Maybe, certain technologies have helped with productivity, but you're not getting paid anymore, okay, for the most part. And so the middle class is really getting destroyed, evaporated, however you want to say it, because really with the middle class, that was typically, people would say you own a home, you own 2 cars, you're married, you have 2 or 3 kids. That's a middle class lifestyle. The really only asset they own is a home for the most part. Most people, when they calculate their net worth, homeowners are much higher because of the equity they have in their home. But with this, with home prices being so elevated, there is, property tax has spiked. Homeowner insurance has gone up drastically. For example, when I owned a home a few years ago, a rental property, my total payment, my mortgage, PIMI, principal, interest, mortgage, insurance, went up 25% in 1 year. And I said, what the hell is going on? Like, this has to be some kind of mistake. But I looked at it, and my assessed tax value of the property went up, and my insurance went up in 1 year. Okay, and so that really hurts the middle class. Okay, and then on top of that, there's lifestyle inflation. Like you want to at least maintain what you have, and then when everything costs more, you're paying more for the same level of stuff, and that lowers your overall income and your overall amount of assets that you own. So pushing you further down in that K-shaped economy. Okay, so something else that's become more of a topic of discussion is the psychological collapse, feeling like no matter what you do, you're behind. Doesn't matter how hard you work, if you work a second job, if you have a side hustle, still feels like the cost of everything has outpaced anything you can do, which is not good for people who are basically starting to check out of society. And so, who benefits? Banks, corporations, investors, and politicians. And we know this, right? People at the top, and then everyone else gets kind of crushed. And so, how do you escape? What's the solution? Well, there are kind of 2 ways to think about it. You can think about it from a policy standpoint, working on migration, closing that down for the most part, eliminating H-1B visas so that Americans can get jobs and not have to compete with foreigners, tax incentives. People have talked about removing property tax, lowering or eliminating federal income tax. There's a bunch of other things. Very unlikely that any of that will happen, at least anytime soon. But there's things you can do in the meantime, which would be to master a high income skill, put as much time as you can into learning something that can make you money, whether it's an online business, whether it is a blue collar skill, or something you can use to get a better job, will always help you. Build assets early, cut your lifestyle creep, right? So the more money you make, you don't need to spend more. You can actually save and invest that difference, and that will put you ahead. And so, unfortunately, the system is rigged, but it's not your fault. It is more of your response to that. Okay, so you can always escape and get into the upper side of the K, but it takes just a lot of work, planning, and thinking. So hope this video helped. Leave a like, and I'll see you in the next one.